My roommate let his girlfriend throw out my weighted blanket and noise machine because they made her uncomfortable. When I confronted him, he smiled like I was overreacting and said, "One day you'll thank her for helping you grow." I just stared at him. That was 8 weeks ago. This morning, she was crying in the lobby after someone slipped a recording of her into every mailbox. My roommate Hugh and I had the kind of bromance that sitcoms dream about. 3 years of harmonious coexistence where the biggest fight we ever had was whether pineapple belongs on pizza. Then Lexi materialized in our lives like a glitter bomb at a funeral. Loud, inappropriate, and impossible to clean up. From day one, she looked at me like I was a puzzle missing half its pieces. As someone on the spectrum, I have specific routines that keep me functional. My weighted blanket isn't a comfort item. It's armor against a world that feels like it's constantly screaming. My noise machine doesn't help me sleep. It prevents my brain from short-circuiting like a smartphone in a bathtub. But explaining this to Lexi was like teaching a snake to play the piano. I tried winning her over. I baked her brownies that could have won awards. I surrendered the prime parking spot. I even sat through her essential oils pyramid scheme presentation with the enthusiasm of a kid on the way to get ice cream, nodding along as she explained how lavender could cure everything from anxiety to the economy. Meanwhile, Hugh was so deep in the love fog, he needed a GPS to find reality. When Lexi rearranged our entire living room because Mercury was in microwaves or whatever, destroying my carefully crafted sensory safe setup that took me months to perfect, Hugh chirped that she was just trying to help. When she threw a surprise party in our apartment, surprise being the operative word, Hugh praised her for being inclusive. If Lexi decided to redecorate with live bees, Hugh would have complimented her commitment to sustainability. The real circus began 2 weeks ago. Lexi cornered me like a door-to-door salesman sensing weakness. She demanded I get rid of my weighted blanket, noise machine, and stress toys because they were embarrassing when her friends came over. I explained that these weren't toys, they were medical equipment for my brain. Without them, I function about as well as a chocolate teapot. Her response hit me like a truck full of ignorance. She said I was 24 years old, not 6, and needed to stop using autism as an excuse to be weird, that her cousin has autism and doesn't need any of that stuff, because obviously all autistic people are identical, like we're manufactured in some factory with default settings. Hugh burst in faster than gossip at a high school reunion, and without even asking what happened, immediately sided with his girlfriend. He actually said I was making Lexi uncomfortable in her second home. She'd been dating him for 4 months, and suddenly our apartment was her second home. I'd lived there for 3 years, but apparently my home was now hostile territory. 3 days ago, I came home from work feeling like my nervous system had been put through a blender. One of those days where every sound felt like a personal attack, and fluorescent lights seemed specifically designed to hurt me. All I wanted was my weighted blanket and 20 minutes of peace to reassemble my scrambled brain, only to find everything was gone. My weighted blanket, the noise machine recommended by my doctor, my entire collection of stress management tools vanished like my faith in humanity. The carefully curated items that kept me stable, that let me function in a world that felt like it was constantly set to the wrong frequency, had disappeared. When I confronted Hugh, he admitted Lexi had thrown everything in the dumpster. Her reasoning was so spectacularly stupid, it deserved its own reality show. She thought she was providing tough love, that without my crutches, I'd magically learn to be normal. Like autism was just a habit I could break, similar to biting my nails or believing in Hugh's judgment. I stood there, smiling like a malfunctioning robot, while Hugh explained how Lexi was helping me grow, how this was for my own good, how I'd thank her one day. But inside my brain, gears were turning with the precision of a Swiss watch. See, while Lexi thought she was teaching me a lesson about growing up, she'd actually just enrolled herself in a master class about consequences. Lexi's most prized possession wasn't Hugh or her collection of healing crystals. It was her pristine white Mercedes, which she treated better than some people treat their kids. She'd park across 2 spaces to avoid door dings. Both Hugh and I have had to walk over half a mile to get home. She'd detail it weekly with the precision of a neurosurgeon. That car was her baby, her identity, her everything, and I just happened to work at a shipping company with access to massive quantities of packing peanuts. Tomorrow morning, when Her Majesty opens her car door expecting her spotless interior, she's about to discover what sensory overload feels like. The static packing peanuts clung to my hands like guilt as I stood in the parking lot at 3 a.m. My fingers trembled against the industrial-sized bag, not from cold, but from the sensory chaos crashing through my nervous system. The revenge plan that seemed so perfect in my head now felt like trying to solve a Rubik's Cube while riding a roller coaster. I dropped the bag. The peanuts scattered across the asphalt like my scattered thoughts. My legs gave out, and I sat right there on the cold ground, rocking slightly as the weight of everything pressed down. The fluorescent parking lot lights buzzed with that specific frequency that made my teeth hurt. Without my weighted blanket, without my noise machine, the world felt like it was turned up to 11, and I had no volume control. I stumbled back to the apartment, leaving the peanuts behind like abandoned dreams. My phone buzzed. Lexi had texted Hugh about hearing concerning noises outside. Of course she had. Morning arrived like a hangover I didn't earn. I shuffled to the bathroom for my routine, the one thing that helped me start each day without feeling like I was drowning. But everything was wrong. My toothbrush sat on the wrong side of the sink. My shower supplies had been rearranged into some aesthetic pattern that made zero functional sense. The body wash was where the shampoo should be. The shampoo was somewhere. My hands started flapping before I could stop them. The meltdown hit like a tsunami. I sank to the bathroom floor, pressing my palms against my eyes as everything became too much, too bright, too loud, too different, too wrong. Hugh knocked on the door, asking if I was being dramatic again. again. His voice carried that new tone he'd developed since Lexi arrived, like he was talking to a toddler having a tantrum. I wanted to explain that this wasn't drama. This was my brain misfiring because someone had destroyed my coping mechanisms, and now even my morning routine was sabotaged. But words wouldn't come. They never did during meltdowns. My work alarm had been going off for 20 minutes. I hadn't even noticed over the static in my head. I made it to work 45 minutes late, my shirt inside out because I'd dressed in a panic. My manager pulled me aside before I could even clock in. Third time this month, she reminded me. Ever since my equipment was destroyed, I'd been struggling to maintain my usual punctuality. She mentioned concerns about reliability. Then she dropped the bomb. HR wanted to meet about my accommodation needs. The word accommodation made my stomach drop. I'd worked so hard to not need official accommodations, to prove I could function without special treatment. Now, Lexi's tough love experiment was destroying 3 years of carefully maintained professional reputation. During lunch, I sat alone in the break room, trying to eat while my hands shook. The tremors had started that morning and wouldn't stop. Sarah from accounting noticed. She'd always been observant in that quiet way that didn't feel invasive. She slid her noise-canceling headphones across the table. She told me they were just for today, but her eyes said she understood this was bigger than today. The headphones sat between us like a life preserver. Accepting them meant admitting how bad things had gotten. My phone screen lit up with 7 missed calls from my mother. Lexi must have reached out to her too. I took the headphones. The moment I put them on, the world muted to a manageable volume. The relief hit so hard I started crying right there in the break room. Sarah didn't say anything, just moved to stand guard by the door, casually checking her phone while blocking anyone from entering. She gave me 10 minutes of protected silence, the first real peace I'd had in days. When I got home that evening, I found my bedroom door open. Lexi stood by my mini fridge, garbage bag in hand, throwing out my safe foods, the mac and cheese that was the only thing I could eat during sensory overload, the specific brand of crackers that didn't have the wrong texture, the juice boxes I kept for blood sugar crashes during meltdowns. All of it went into her bag while she muttered about expiration dates. They weren't expired. I knew because I checked dates obsessively. Another autism thing Lexi probably thought needed fixing. Something inside me snapped, not in the violent way people assume when autistic people get overwhelmed, but in the way a rubber band breaks after being stretched too far. I yelled at her to get out. My voice came out raw and desperate, nothing like the calculated anger I'd planned. Lexi's face transformed into a satisfied smile. She already had her phone out, recording. She made sure to capture my hand flapping, the way I rocked on my heels, framing every stim as an aggressive gesture. She backed out of my room slowly, still filming, narrating about feeling threatened. Within an hour, she'd posted the video in the building's Facebook group. The caption read like a concerned citizen's plea. "I'm worried about violent behavior from my roommate. Should I call someone? I just want everyone to be safe." 3 neighbors commented supportively within minutes. They didn't know the context, didn't see the weeks of systematic destruction that led to that moment. I can't believe Lexi had the nerve to throw out all those important medical items and then film the poor guy having a completely understandable reaction. They just saw an autistic person yelling and stimming, and Lexi's careful framing did the rest. Then a private message popped up. Mrs. Chen from 4B wrote simply, "I don't believe her." That tiny message kept me from completely spiraling as I watched my reputation in the building crumble in real time. I went to take out the trash, needing to move, needing to do something. In the bin, I found a receipt that made my blood run cold. From the grocery store, time-stamped during my work hours today. Lexi had bought exactly my safe foods, the same brands, the same amounts, just to throw them away. She'd planned this, bought my food specifically to destroy it, to make me melt down, to film it. Hugh confronted me an hour later, using words that sounded rehearsed. He was concerned about me scaring Lexi. Maybe I needed professional help beyond my current therapist. The way he said it made clear this wasn't his idea, but he'd adopted it as his own. Then my phone rang. My mother's contact photo filled the screen. I knew before answering that Lexi had reached out to her too. Mom's voice carried that careful tone she used when she thought I was having an episode. She asked if I was taking my medication properly, if maybe I needed to adjust my dose. I didn't have medication. I'd told her this dozens of times. Autism isn't something you medicate away. But Lexi's concern had overwritten years of education. The next day at work, everything felt harder. During a team meeting, I caught myself rocking in my chair, my usual subtle motion that helped me focus. But without my other coping tools, it had become more pronounced. My colleagues exchanged glances. Quick, but I caught them. An email preview popped up on my phone. Performance improvement plan discussion. When I got home, Lexi was cooking fish. The smell hit me like a physical wall. She knew I couldn't handle strong food smells, especially during my usual quiet time. She called out cheerfully that she was helping expand my palate, that I'd thank her later. Thursday's therapy appointment became my only stable point in a world tilting off its axis. Dr. Martinez noted significant regression in my coping abilities. She recommended stress leave, but we both knew I couldn't afford it. Not financially, not professionally, not when HR was already scrutinizing my accommodations. I tried to file a complaint with building management about my belongings being thrown away. Brad, the building manager, dismissed it with a shrug. He said it was hard living with special needs people, that Lexi was probably trying to help. His niece sold Lexi's essential oils, I remembered. The MLM network ran deep. I attempted to document everything on my phone, but executive function had become nearly impossible without my sensory regulation tools. My notes were fragmented, desperate. Sentences that started strong but trailed off as my focus shattered. Screenshots saved but not organized. Evidence that would look like chaos to anyone else. Then I found the letter. Lexi had signed me up for an autism social skills class class at the community center, using my insurance information. The insurance company had approved it based on her statement as my caregiver. She'd forged documents claiming she was my caregiver. Two neighbors started avoiding me in the hallways. I overheard one whisper to her husband that Lexi said I was getting worse. She clutched her purse tighter when passing me, as if autism was contagious or violent. The realization hit me during another sleepless night. The stress was making me display more visible autistic traits. Every stim, every moment of overwhelm, every meltdown played perfectly into Lexi's narrative. She was causing the behavior she claimed to be concerned about. Sarah found me in the supply closet the next day, not crying this time, just sitting among the boxes of paper trying to find quiet. She mentioned her brother had dealt with something similar, an ex who wanted to fix him. She offered to set up a call after work. That evening, I talked to Tom over video chat. He looked tired in the way that comes from surviving something rather than just experiencing it. He told me his ex had done similar things but gave up after 6 months. When I asked why she gave up, he went quiet. Then he said we'd talk about that later. The next morning, a package arrived. My Amazon order of replacement sensory items. Lexi intercepted it at the door, refusing to give it to me. She claimed it was enabling unhealthy coping. She held my medical equipment hostage in the name of helping me grow. But that afternoon, a small miracle. Mrs. Chen caught me in the hallway and quietly pressed something soft into my hands. A homemade weighted lap pad. Her grandson had used it, she explained. Then she whispered not to tell anyone and disappeared into her apartment before I could thank her. I sat in the stairwell with that lap pad across my legs and felt human for the first time in weeks. The weight grounded me just enough to think clearly, to realize this was far from over, to understand that Lexi wasn't done with her campaign of help. But for just that moment, with Mrs. Chen's secret gift providing a tiny island of sensory peace, I could breathe. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new videos, new concerned citizens, new attempts to fix me. But right now, I had this, a lap pad made with love by someone who understood that sometimes the smallest accommodations make the biggest difference. It wasn't enough, but it was something. And sometimes, something is all you need to survive another day. The weighted lap pad became my lifeline through the weekend. But Monday morning brought fresh hell. Lexi had emailed my HR department over the weekend. The subject line glowed on my work computer. Concerns from a roommate regarding employee mental state. She'd attached edited versions of her videos, carefully cropped to remove context. The email copied me, she claimed, for transparency. My hands trembled as I read her message. She'd positioned herself as a concerned citizen worried about workplace safety. The videos showed me stimming, rocking, flapping my hands, all framed as aggressive or unstable behavior. HR scheduled a mandatory fitness for duty evaluation for the following week. I stared at the screen, understanding dawning like ice water in my veins. This could end my career. 3 years of perfect performance reviews, destroyed by someone who'd known me for 4 months. Sarah appeared at my desk with a cup of tea and a knowing look. She'd seen the email too. Lexi had somehow found her work address and copied her as well. We didn't need words. Sarah simply squeezed my shoulder and returned to her desk, but I noticed her typing furiously. Within an hour, 2 other co-workers had quietly stopped by my desk with small gestures of support. A stress ball left by my keyboard, a bag of my favorite sensory-friendly snacks. They were creating a buffer. That evening, Tom called earlier than planned. His face on the video screen looked grim. He'd been thinking about my situation all weekend, he said, and needed to tell me something. His ex had only stopped her campaign after he'd had a stress-induced seizure. She'd gotten scared of legal liability, but not before she'd systematically destroyed his career, his friendships, and his mental health. The medical bills from the seizure had bankrupted him. He'd lost his apartment. It took 2 years to rebuild. The connection clicked. Tom's exhaustion wasn't just from surviving. It was from knowing the true cost of this kind of targeted harassment. He warned me to document everything, even if my executive function made it messy. Even disorganized evidence was better than none. Tuesday morning, I submitted my documentation to my therapist. Dr. Martinez wrote a detailed letter supporting my workplace accommodations, but she had to note the significant environmental stressors at home. She suggested gently that I might need to consider alternative living arrangements. The words felt like defeat. I tried creating a comprehensive log on my phone, but the stress made organization nearly impossible. My entries became fragmented, half-finished sentences, screenshots saved in the wrong folders, timestamps that didn't make sense because I'd forgotten to note the dates. It looked exactly like what it was, the desperate documentation of someone whose executive function was failing under extreme stress. Property management responded to my formal complaint with bureaucratic indifference. They couldn't intervene in roommate disagreements. The property manager noted, however, that I'd seemed agitated during our meeting. Another mark against me. Another piece of Lexi's narrative confirmed, but something shifted at work. Sarah and 2 others had quietly organized. When Lexi showed up at the office Thursday claiming to check on me, they formed a subtle barrier. Sarah engaged her in conversation about essential oils. Another co-worker asked detailed questions about her Mercedes. Security started recognizing her, noting her visits in their log. She couldn't get near my workspace. Friday afternoon, I overheard Lexi on a phone call. She was discussing conservatorship options with someone, mentioning adults who couldn't care for themselves. The words legal guardianship drifted through her bedroom door. My blood ran cold. She was escalating beyond harassment into legal control. Tom's warnings suddenly felt prophetic. He'd sent me links to forums where people like Lexi gathered, autism warrior parents and partners who believed tough love could cure neurodivergence. The rhetoric was terrifying in its certainty. They shared strategies for gaining legal control over resistant adults. results. Lexi's playbook was written by others who'd done this before. The weekend brought temporary relief. I spent Saturday creating the most detailed documentation I could manage, despite my scattered focus. Tom had suggested using voice recordings when writing became too hard. My phone filled with rambling audio notes, timestamps of Lexi's behavior, descriptions of what she'd done. Mrs. Chen coming through with a secret weighted lap pad like she's running an underground sensory support network. This sweet grandma is basically the resistance leader we all need right now. It wasn't organized, but it existed. Sunday, I forced myself to appear normal during the fitness for duty evaluation prep. I researched common questions, practiced maintaining eye contact, rehearsed explanations for my accommodations that sounded professional rather than desperate. The mask I'd spent years learning to wear had never felt heavier. The evaluation itself took place Wednesday morning. I sat across from an occupational therapist who seemed kind but clinical. I forced myself to appear calm, professional, stable. Every instinct screamed to stim, to rock, to self-soothe, but I kept my hands folded carefully in my lap. I explained my accommodations in measured tones. I presented Dr. Martinez's letter. I maintained the neurotypical performance that was slowly culling me. She noted I seemed tired but functional. The evaluation cleared me with a recommendation for ongoing monitoring. My job was safe, but now every mistake would be scrutinized through the lens of mental fitness. Every bad day would be pathologized. Every normal human error would be evidence. The lease renewal arrived that afternoon. Lexi had convinced Hugh to add her as an official tenant. All 3 signatures were required. The document sat on the kitchen counter like a ticking bomb. 72 hours to decide whether to sign away more power to someone actively destroying me or lose my home. I scheduled apartment viewings as backup, but the rental market was brutal. Everything in my price range was either too far from work or sensory nightmares. Thin walls, fluorescent lighting, no accommodations for my needs. Leaving meant starting over. Staying meant continued torture. Mrs. Chen's daughter, Catherine, visited that weekend. I'd seen her before, a quiet woman who nodded politely in hallways. This time, she lingered after leaving her mother's apartment. She mentioned casually that she was a lawyer. She'd noticed some interesting behavior during her visits. She'd started documenting interactions, she said, just in case. The words were carefully neutral, but her eyes held understanding. Lexi called an apartment meeting Sunday evening. She'd prepared a presentation, actual slides on her laptop, detailing my concerning behaviors. Every normal stim was reframed as disturbing. Hand flapping became aggressive gesturing. Rocking became unstable behavior. My use of headphones became anti-social withdrawal. Hugh nodded along, not because he agreed, but because agreeing meant the conflict would end sooner. She concluded with a suggestion that I might be happier in a group home with people who understood my needs. She'd researched several facilities, she said. She'd be happy to help with the transition. Her tone was poisonously sweet, all concern and care while she tried to institutionalize me. Hugh pulled me aside later, exhausted. He just wanted everyone to get along. Couldn't I try harder to compromise? He didn't see how his peacekeeping enabled her behavior. He didn't understand that compromise meant accepting abuse. Sarah's brother sent more links that night. The pattern was clear. Lexi's rhetoric matched word for word with posts from those forums. She genuinely believed she was helping. In her mind, she was saving me from myself. The fact that she was destroying me in the process was just proof that I needed more help. Only Hugh and Brad, the building manager, fully bought Lexi's narrative, but that was enough. Hugh controlled half the apartment. Brad controlled whether I could file complaints. 2 people believing her lies was sufficient to make my life unbearable. The work evaluation results came back, cleared but monitored. Every future mistake would be viewed through the lens of mental fitness. The relief of keeping my job was tempered by the knowledge that I was now permanently marked as potentially unstable. Sarah offered her spare room that evening. A clean break, she said, a chance to heal. But I knew leaving meant Lexi won. It meant abandoning my home, admitting defeat. More importantly, it meant she'd do this to someone else. I chose to stay, even knowing the cost. The next few days blurred together. Lexi escalated her provocations. She played loud music during my documented quiet hours, calling it exposure therapy. She cooked foods with strong smells during my usual decompression time. She rearranged common spaces daily, destroying any sense of predictability. Each action was framed as helpful. Each torture was therapy in her twisted logic. My work performance improved slightly, thanks to my co-workers' support. Sarah had quietly stocked the break room with sensory items. Nothing obvious, just stress balls and fidget toys anyone might use. But at home, I was deteriorating. The fitness tracker I wore for health insurance showed an average of 3 hours of sleep per night. Stress-induced insomnia was destroying what little function I had left. A small support network formed organically. Sarah checked in daily. Mrs. Chen left small gifts of food or comfort items by my door. Dr. Martinez extended session times without charging extra. The legal aid volunteer Catherine had connected me with called weekly. Each person held a piece of my stability. Lexi's provocations grew more desperate as I survived each attack. Her certainty was shaking. She'd expected me to have already broken, to have admitted I needed her help. My continued existence, battered but unbroken, challenged her worldview. Hugh caught her crying one evening while reading her forums. Real tears, not manipulation. She genuinely believed I was choosing to be autistic. In her world, I was a stubborn child refusing to grow up. The forums reinforced this belief with pseudo-scientific articles and anecdotes about recovered autistic people who'd learned to be normal. The contrast between us became stark. My documentation, messy but consistent, showed a pattern of escalating harassment. Lexi's interventions grew increasingly frantic as each failed to produce the breakthrough she expected. She was losing control of of the narrative. Dr. Martinez called with urgent news. Someone claiming to be my caregiver had requested my therapy records. The request used language that suggested legal authority. Lexi was trying to access my private medical information. Dr. Martinez had refused, but the attempt was troubling. The lease renewal deadline approached like a storm. 72 hours became 48, became 24. I had to decide whether to sign away more power or lose my home. The apartment viewing I'd scheduled was a disaster. The landlord took one look at my stimming and suddenly remembered other applications. 5 neighbors filed formal complaints about Lexi's music therapy sessions. The noise violated building quiet hours. Brad had to issue a warning, though he made it clear he still thought she was trying to help. The tide was turning, slowly. The stakes crystallized. My mental health versus my home. My stability versus my principles. My survival versus justice. There was no winning move, only choosing which loss I could live with. I signed the lease renewal with shaking hands. Lexi filmed the entire meeting for documentation. Under the table, Mrs. Chen's lap pad pressed against my legs, the only thing keeping me grounded. My signature looked like a child's scrawl, another sign of instability for Lexi's collection. Hugh's family group chat exploded that evening. Lexi had sent an unsolicited article about enabling autism to his entire family. His sister, a speech therapist, removed Lexi from the chat with a scathing response about neurodiversity. Hugh's parents asked pointed questions about his girlfriend's behavior. The first crack in his armor appeared. The building community shifted subtly. Neighbors started coordinating to ensure I never came home to an empty apartment. Someone always happened to be in the lobby when I arrived. Small talk, nothing obvious, but I was never alone with Lexi in common spaces. Catherine helped file a formal housing discrimination complaint. Not a lawsuit, I couldn't afford that. Just documentation with the housing authority. It would take years to resolve, but it created an official record. Paper trails mattered, even messy ones. Lexi played her final card. She told Hugh I'd made a pass at her. The accusation was so obviously false that even Hugh couldn't pretend to believe it, but he was too exhausted to fight. He confronted me weakly, going through the motions. Our friendship, already strained, snapped completely. We became roommates in the coldest sense of the word. News trickled in through Tom. Lexi's MLM had put her on probation. She'd been aggressively recruiting at autism support groups, targeting vulnerable individuals. Complaints had piled up. Her income stream was threatened. The pressure was building on her, too. The building implemented new policies that happened to support my needs. Weighted blankets appeared in common areas for everyone's comfort. Sensory-friendly hours were posted in the lobby. Nothing official, nothing that named me, but the community was quietly adapting. A local disability rights group featured my story anonymously in their newsletter. The details were changed, but the pattern was clear. Lexi's previous victim recognized it and reached out to the organization. The pattern was documented. She'd done this before. I confronted Hugh with simple truth. No drama, no accusations, just facts. She was hurting me, and he was letting her. He couldn't make eye contact. He admitted he knew, but was too tired to deal with it. Our friendship officially died with a whimper, not a bang. 3 years of brotherhood, destroyed by 4 months of toxic love. Tom shared harder truths. His ex's previous victim had taken 11 months before attempting suicide. Only then had the family intervened. The ex had moved on to new targets within weeks. The cycle continued until someone pressed charges. Even then, she'd painted herself as the victim, claiming she'd only tried to help ungrateful people who refused to better themselves. Mrs. Chen's daughter, Catherine, being a lawyer and just casually dropping that bombshell while documenting everything is pure genius. Property management issued new quiet hours that aligned with my needs. They couldn't take sides, they said, but noise violations were noise violations. Lexi's music therapy was now officially against building rules. Small victories felt hollow against the daily damage. I resubmitted my disability accommodation request with updated medical documentation. The file was thick now, documenting not just my autism, but the deterioration caused by months of harassment. Dr. Martinez's notes painted a clear picture of regression under targeted abuse. The building's small kindnesses accumulated. Elevators held without being asked. Packages accepted without question. Brief smiles in hallways. Not dramatic gestures, just human decency in the face of cruelty. It wasn't enough to fix things, but it made survival possible. Lexi launched her most desperate attack. She called Adult Protective Services, claiming I was a danger to myself. She used my therapy admission about self-harm thoughts as evidence. The complaint triggered an investigation. Official letters arrived. Caseworkers would visit. My competence would be evaluated by strangers. Some neighbors distanced themselves again. APS involvement scared them, even if they didn't believe Lexi. The whispers returned. The avoided eye contact. The clutched purses. I was truly alone in the ways that mattered most. The APS interview loomed. Hugh buried himself in work, avoiding the apartment entirely. Neighbors who'd shown support went silent when asked to provide statements. Everyone wanted to help until help required official involvement. I would navigate this alone. The investigator arrived on a Tuesday morning. I sat in my living room, hands folded to hide the tremors, and proved my competence while experiencing the worst mental health crisis of my life. Every question felt like a trap. Every answer was scrutinized. She noted the hostile living environment, but said it wasn't her department. The investigation closed with bureaucratic efficiency. I was competent, no immediate danger. They recommended addressing household conflict and provided pamphlets about mediation. Lexi smirked at the findings. The system had failed exactly as she'd expected. I made a decision that night. The recording of Lexi admitting she'd done this before, the one Mrs. Chen had quietly captured, needed to be shared. Privacy concerns battled with survival survival instinct. I chose survival. The building WhatsApp group exploded when I posted the audio. Lexi's voice, clear and confident, admitting she'd helped people like this before. Her frustration that they never want to change. The revelation that this was a pattern, not a misguided attempt to help one difficult roommate. Former neighbors of her previous victim confirmed the story. The pattern was identical. The escalation predictable. The destruction methodical. Lexi wasn't misguided. She was a serial abuser who targeted neurodivergent people through their support systems. I confronted her alone in the kitchen that night. No cameras, no witnesses, just truth. I told her she wasn't helping. She was torturing me. She knew this. Her mask dropped completely. The sweet concern vanished. She snarled that someone had to make me act normal. My parents had clearly failed. Society was too soft on people like me. She was doing what needed to be done. Mrs. Chen entered at that moment, phone in hand, ostensibly checking a recipe. But I saw the recording icon. She captured Lexi's real face, the cruelty beneath the care, evidence that couldn't be edited or reframed. I faced a choice. Use the recording to destroy Lexi completely, or leverage it for peace. Revenge tempted like water in the desert, but I was too tired for war. I chose a middle path. Tom shared how his ex's previous victim had taken 11 months before attempting suicide. Then the family finally intervened. The information hit me like ice water. I understood now why he'd been so urgent about documentation. His hands moved nervously as he explained the pattern. First the isolation, then the escalation, then the breaking point. Property management implemented new quiet hours that happened to align with my needs. Brad posted the notice with obvious reluctance, but 5 separate noise complaints had forced his hand. Lexi's music therapy sessions were now officially violations. She tested the new rules immediately, cranking up meditation sounds at 10 p.m. 3 neighbors called security within minutes. I resubmitted my disability accommodation request with Dr. Martinez's updated documentation. The file had grown thick with evidence of regression, stress markers, deteriorating executive function. Each page painted a picture of systematic destruction. The HR representative's expression shifted as she read through it, understanding dawning slowly. Small kindnesses from residents accumulated like drops filling a bucket. The elevator always seemed to be held when I arrived. My packages appeared at my door without my asking. Brief nods in hallways replaced the previous avoidance. Not dramatic gestures, just quiet human decency pushing back against cruelty. Lexi launched her most desperate attack yet. The call to Adult Protective Services used my therapy admission about self-harm thoughts as ammunition. She'd twisted my moment of vulnerability into a weapon. The official investigation letter arrived 2 days later, requiring my compliance with evaluation procedures. Some neighbors who'd been warming up pulled back again. APS involvement carried stigma, even when unfounded. I caught whispers in the stairwell, saw the return of clutched purses and avoided eye contact. The small progress evaporated. I was truly alone in the ways that mattered most for official proceedings. The APS investigator arrived Tuesday morning. I sat in my living room, forcing my hands still to hide the tremors, and performed competence while drowning. Each question felt designed to trap me. She noted the hostile living environment, but explained it wasn't her department. Her bureaucratic indifference felt like another betrayal. Hugh had been avoiding the apartment for days, practically living at his office. When forced to return for clothes, he moved like a ghost, grabbing items and fleeing. Our 3-year friendship had become mutual avoidance. The investigation closed with predictable results. I was competent, no immediate danger. Recommendation to address household conflict through mediation. Lexi's satisfied smirk at the findings made my stomach turn. I made my decision that night. Mrs. Chen's recording of Lexi admitting she'd done this before needed to be shared. My hands shook as I uploaded the audio to the building WhatsApp group. The clear admission that she'd helped people like this before, and her frustration that they never want to change, spread through the building like wildfire. Former neighbors of her previous victim emerged from the digital woodwork. They confirmed the pattern. The same escalation, the same tactics, the same destruction. One shared screenshots from 2 years ago showing identical rhetoric. Lexi wasn't misguided. She was a serial predator who hunted neurodivergent people through their support systems. The confrontation came that evening in the kitchen. No cameras this time, no audience, just truth delivered with exhausted finality. I told her she wasn't helping. She was torturing me. She knew exactly what she was doing. Her mask shattered completely. The sweet concern evaporated, replaced by naked contempt. She snarled that someone had to make me act normal since my parents had clearly failed. Society was too soft on people like me. She was doing what needed to be done. The venom in her voice made my skin crawl. Mrs. Chen entered at that perfect moment, phone in hand, ostensibly checking a recipe. But I caught the recording icon's glow. She captured Lexi's unfiltered cruelty, the real face behind the helpful facade, evidence that couldn't be edited or reframed or explained away. I weighed my options carefully. The recording could destroy Lexi completely, sent to her employer, her MLM, posted across social media. Revenge beckoned seductively, but exhaustion won. I was too tired for scorched earth. I chose a middle path. The ultimatum was simple: 30 days to leave voluntarily, or the recording would go everywhere that mattered. Her employer would see it. Her MLM upline would receive copies. Every social media platform where she portrayed herself as a wellness advocate would know the truth. Mercy with teeth. Lexi's hands shook for the first time since I'd known her. The control she'd wielded so confidently crumbled. She tried to negotiate, then threaten, then plead. Each attempt bounced off my exhausted determination. The power dynamic had finally, definitively shifted. Hugh returned from his work hideout to find us in standoff. His exhaustion mirrored mine as he took in the scene. His response surprised no one. He couldn't do this anymore. The words came out out flat, defeated. He was moving back with his parents. The apartment drama had broken him too. Lexi's final manipulation attempt was desperate. She turned to Hugh, insisting he'd choose her over me. Her confidence wavered as he shook his head. He repeated that he was done with both of us, that we were both crazy, that he just wanted peace. Her last card had failed spectacularly. The next month passed in careful choreography. I spent it in Sarah's spare room while Lexi served out her notice under constant community surveillance. Every return to the apartment happened with witnesses present. Sarah, Mrs. Chen, Catherine, or other neighbors always materialized when needed. Lexi couldn't make a move without observation. She tried several times to provoke confrontations, hoping to flip the narrative again. Each attempt met silent recording phones and steady gazes. The building had closed ranks. Her isolation was complete and suffocating. She left after 3 weeks, claiming the environment had become hostile and unsafe. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The building's culture shifted subtly but significantly after her departure. No official policies changed, but an unspoken neurodivergent protection network emerged. Weighted blankets appeared in common areas. Quiet hours were religiously observed. New residents received gentle orientation about community values. The change wasn't dramatic, just a collective decision to be better. I reclaimed my apartment slowly, rebuilding my sensory environment with donated items and hard-won peace. Neighbors contributed what they could. A white noise machine here, a weighted blanket there. Mrs. Chen's lap pad took pride of place on my couch. Each item represented community choosing compassion over cruelty. Sleep returned gradually. The first full night's rest felt like a miracle after months of stress-induced insomnia. My Fitbit showed the slow climb back to normal patterns. 3 hours became 4, then 5, then finally regular 7-hour stretches. My body began to trust safety again. Work accommodations were approved with full support. The performance improvement plan dissolved as my productivity recovered. Sarah had quietly documented my improvement, creating a counter-narrative to Lexi's sabotage. My colleagues' relief was palpable as I returned to my competent self. Hugh sent a single text 6 months later. Brief, heavy, with unspoken weight. He was sorry. I'd been right. Lexi was doing it to his cousin now. The cycle had already restarted with a new victim. My stomach dropped at the news, but I'd learned my limits. I forwarded his message to the disability rights group and hoped his cousin was stronger than me. Tom and I maintained our weekly video calls, eventually joined by 2 others who'd survived similar situations. We shared strategies for recognizing predators wrapped in good intentions. The patterns were depressingly consistent, always helping, always concerned, always escalating. Our informal support network grew organically. 1 year later, I lived alone by choice in the same apartment. Professional stability had returned with proper accommodations. The quiet support network that had formed through trauma remained, less urgent now, but still present. Neighbors still smiled in hallways. Mrs. Chen still checked in with homemade food. Sarah still joined for lunch breaks. The victory wasn't dramatic. No legal justice, no public vindication, no sweeping changes, just survival and slow healing. I sat on my couch during a video call with Tom and the others, my weighted blanket draped over my shoulders, sharing recognition strategies with someone whose family member had started dating a helpful new partner. The real victory was simpler than revenge. It was still being here, still functioning, still whole despite someone's determined efforts to break me. Sometimes the most realistic ending is just endurance, just outlasting those who would reshape us into their image of normal. My apartment was mine again, my routines restored, my support systems rebuilt stronger for having been tested. Not a fairy tale ending, just a human one, and that was enough. Thanks for getting to the end. Subscribe for more content.